Welcome back, guys. So I believe that we all know that we have about 5 days or so to the much awaited December 7th general elections. So I think today, Monday, was a turn of the special voters, those in the media space and then those in the security agencies that one way or the other will be assisting with the December 7th election on Saturday. I think I also understand those in the Western and then Eastern, also one of those regions, would also vote on Wednesday because there wasn't much arrangement made for them today. So whatever be the case, because we are left with about 5 days or so to the election, I decided to just come up with this model to um, study the numbers in terms of the current voters register against what we used for the 2020 elections, just to see how each of the two main political parties, the NDC and then the NPP, will fare based on a number of scenarios that we'll be discussing shortly. Um, the model, or I should say, the foundation of the model, of course, is based on the result we had in the 2020 general elections. Of course, um, um, the foundation of any particular model or um, current numbers or future numbers, of course, so certainly you cannot do without past data. And for that matter, we have the December 2020 election results as the foundation of this particular model. So if I should just take you through the foundation of this model, you can see that on column C, we have the final voters register for 2020. So this is broken down into each of the regions. So we have right from Ahafo here through to the last region, which we have North, Western North, of course, in no particular order. Yeah. So this is the just to reiterate, this is the final register for 2020 that was used in the presidential and then parliamentary election. The total number of voters, of course, was 17 million and 27,641. So you can confirm this from the EC website and all the other well-known sources. So of course, what I have ensured is to make sure that the foundation is correct, because all the projections that I'm going to do based on the 2024 voters register and whatever scenarios that I will do will be based on this historical data. And for that matter, the numbers that will churn out will not be far from wrong. You get it? Okay, so then aside that, I also have the total valid vote cast. Of course, we all know that what forms the denominator in calculating what each presidential um, candidate had is the total valid vote cast. So on the day of the elections, a lot of people might turn up for the election, but fortunately or unfortunately, some voters would have their vote not counted as part of the valid vote cast. Of course, we have rejected ballot, we have some other conditions that may one way or the other make some people's votes invalid. So at the end of the day, we take the invalid votes out of the valid ones that we've cast and then use the total valid vote cast as the denominator. So we compute what percentage each candidate had by dividing the total valid votes that each candidate got against the total valid vote cast. Okay, so that's it. Just to retrieve the total valid vote cast again. So is the total votes that were cast on the election day minus the rejected or the spoiled ballot. That gives us the total valid vote cast, and that is what is used at the denominator in computing whatever percentage that each candidate will get. So with the total valid vote cast for the 2020 elections, this column summarizes all the total valid vote cast per each region. So if you can see, it means that the total valid vote cast as a percentage of the total voters register was 77%. But when you go when you delve deeper in most of the data, you would see that the total turnout was somewhere around 79%. But this 77% we have here, of course, excludes the rejected ballot. Of course, that's the most important denominator that we use. So that's how come I've not really considered rejected ballot here. So all the numbers that you see here are basically the valid vote cast, which counts towards somebody being pronounced as the winner of the election. Okay, so um, out of the total valid vote cast, I've just computed the percentage of the total valid vote cast as a percentage of what the total valid vote cast. The total number on the voters register. So just to cite an example, you have a half a region 316,970 being the total number of voters on the register, and out of it we have about 264,490 as the total valid vote cast. That forms around 83.44%, right? So when you scroll down here, you see all the other regions have their various percentages. Of course, that shot up to the 77.63%. Okay, so out of these total valid vote cast, when you check this column, this is what NPP had. So if I can scroll down here, this is what NPP had. So in all, the 2020 election, NPP had 6.7 million. I mean, if I should mention the number exactly, you have 6,776,066 votes. That is what they had, and that represents about 51.26% of the total valid vote cast. So if you can see the formula, well, we're dividing the NPP's total valid vote cast by the total valid vote cast. That gave them 51.26%. That's, I mean, when we round the percentage to, you know, two decimal places, some do round it to one decimal place and get 51.3. It's not significantly different from this anyway. And then this column H and I also shows what the NDC got. So in total, the NDC got 6,265,266 votes, and that represents about 47.4% of the total valid vote cast. So you can see that these were the numbers that got His Excellency Nana Akufo-Addo declared as the president in the 2020 elections. Okay, so aside that too, I've also put together the votes that all the other political parties got. So you see the other parties here. So I can just rename this and do it other parties. Okay, so this is what they also got. They all got 176,744, and that represents 1.34% of the total valid vote cast. Okay, so this is basically the foundation of the model that I have developed. So when you look at the NPP and then the NDC column, I've shaded some of the cells in green. That would tell you that for each region, what each of these two main political parties won. So if you take a half, for instance, NPP won it. If you take Ashanti, and this NPP won. So NPP won, I think, 7 out of the 16 regions. One, two, three, one, two, one. 7 out of the 16 regions. And then the NDC also won 9 out of the 16 regions. So all these percentages that you have here are the total valid votes cast as a percentage of the total, sorry, all these percentages that you see here are the total valid votes cast that each party won versus the total valid votes cast during the elections. So for each region. So if you take the Ahafo region, for instance, the NPP had 55.04% of the total valid votes cast. So you can do a test check. So you can see that the total valid vote cast of 145,584 over the total valid vote cast of what? 264,490. Okay, the same thing applies to the NDC. If you should highlight this formula, it is also dividing 116,485, which is the valid votes garnered by NDC over the total valid vote cast of this 264,000. Yeah. So basically that, and then the other part is too, you can do a test check with this one. It's the same thing. Okay, cool. So you can also confirm the total valid vote cast on the by each political party on the EC's website. So total NPP had 13 million. Sorry, um, the total valid vote cast 13,218,076. You can confirm this from the EC's website, and then what the NPP had, which is this 6.7 million, and then the NDC 6.2 million. We can confirm all these from the EC's website. Okay, so that's basically the foundation of this model, and then that shoots up into the 2024 numbers. So this this is the regional breakdown of the 2024 voters register. So we take this column 2024 voters register. Of course, the final one that will be used for the election on the 7th December, which is this coming Saturday. The total registered voters 18,774,159. Yes, so this is basically what will be used for the upcoming election. I try to compare that to the 2020 final register to check what the increase has been so far. So we can see that, of course, there's been some significant increase in it. If you can just do a percentage increase, this over the 2016 total voters register, which was 17,027. What, how much are we getting? We're getting about a 10% increase in the current year compared to 2020. So of course, I mean, 10% is quite a significant number. And in terms of number, it's 1.7 million. That's not a bad number at all. It means that those first voters are quite a number of the total voters register. That should tell you that the voter population is quite young. Okay, that's just by the way. So in terms of the increment in the current year compared to the voters register for 2020, you can see that Ashanti region was in the lead with about 271,000 new voters. When you check the rank column here, which is column N, let me look for number two. Of course, it will certainly be the Greater Accra region. So this is it, 231,000. The third one, the Central region, 214,000. I'm looking for Volta region, which is the stronghold of the NDC. Which number are they? So, okay, so is the region which saw the seventh increase in the number of new voters, of course, recording about 94,000 or rounded to 95,000 people being added to their register. Okay, so that's just by the way from the 2024 voters register. So um, these are what I should say from the foundation of this particular model. So now that we have this, what we are going to use this to do is to generate a number of scenarios with um, basically some of the pools that some civil society organizations have run, some pools that some media houses have run, and the discussion among the general public, what their view of what this year's election is going to be. So we've used those to come up with a number of scenarios which we will be going through in no time. So of course, I should also introduce you to some few assumptions that might be made in running some of these scenarios and then the model. The first one is, over the years, um, the voter turnout has not that been significant. I don't know what the argument would be. Some might, 78% or 79% as a big turnout. But for me, I think that once the voter register has been cleaned very well, if a turnout of around 85% to 90% shouldn't be bad. But unfortunately, based on the current situation, we normally don't record such high numbers. So 2020, the turnout was 78%. Down to 2008, the turnout was about 73%. So averagely, over the past 4 5 elections, the average turnout has been around 73 to 74%. So, you know, but considering the level of education that the EC has run, coming down to this election and how people are poised to, make their vote count, I'm thinking that this year the turnout might increase. Yeah. So just to point this out, these turnouts basically are the total turnout. So it includes both the valid vote cast and then the rejected ballots, of course. But this 2020, the total turnout was almost 79%. But when you look at the valid vote cast, and when you scoop that one out, you realize that the valid vote cast as a percentage of the total voters register was somewhere around 77%. So that was just to make you aware. These are, I should say, gross numbers. So once the um, the rejected ballot or spoiled ballots are taken out, the percentages drop a bit. But for the purpose of this illustration, we might, of course, I expect an increase based on what we have just discussed in the total turnout, but I don't expect it to be over the line. So maybe we could consider an increment in the turnout of about 3%. But notwithstanding that, the model is so robust that we can be playing around the increment in the turnout. So in the model, when we do the demonstration, we can change it between 1%, 5%, and even go as high as 10% to see what the impact will have on the numbers based on whatever scenarios that we will discuss. Okay. Um, the other thing I want to also make you aware is that the third parties, which we normally call the third force, this election, those are that are up for the election are basically the NPP and then the NDC. I'm not quite sure if there will be any miracle this year. Of course, there wouldn't. The two parties that are in contention still remain those two. So but talking of the third parties, they've not really performed quite well over the past elections. So you see that in 2020, the other parties apart from NPP and DC garnered about 1.34 votes of the valid vote cast. And then 2016, 1.74, then 2020, 2012, 1.56. I think it was 2008 that we recorded a bigger number, about 2.92, of which Dr. Papa Kwesindum was very prominent in that election, garnering about 1.32% of the total valid vote cast. I think that was also contributed to why the election had to go into a runoff and then Professor Mills winning after the election, the second round. Yeah. So in this model, to try as much as possible to also kind of appreciate the numbers of these third parties, apart from NPP and NDC. Of course, this year we've seen that Nana Kwame Bediako, who we normally call Cheddar, has made some significant progress in his campaign. Yeah, so we expect that at least he should win a couple of votes in some of the regions, particularly the Ashanti region. The Ashanti region where he normally says that's a stronghold. And then Alam too, we also would expect to pull some amount of votes in the Ashanti region and the other regions. But we don't expect that the total, you know, the total percentage that these third parties would get as a percentage of the total valid vote cast will exceed 3%. But I won't also be surprised if some are able to pull surprises and probably push the election into a run of. That's a possibility, but I see it to be quite remote. Okay, that's just by the way. So I think these are the two main assumptions that I think we might be able to um, incorporate in the model that we've built. But I think that with these two assumptions, we can still play around them. So as we go into the various discussions, I think we will come across that. So that's just by the way. So for in this video, I'm going to do the first scenario, right? I'm going to do the first scenario, what I call scenario one. I think I mistakenly changed this to three. So for scenario one, um, if I can take you back to the model. So this is the basic model, right? This is the basic model. The basic model has the 2024 voter register total grouped by region, right? And then, of course, these increases, I just brought it for illustration. We are not going to even use it. Yeah. So we have this column that I've colored in blue, right? All these columns are what we're going to use for the 2024 analytics. Of course, consider a lot of scenarios and then based on that, see how both NPP and NDC will fare in this election. I'm sure some of these political parties have developed their own models and then played around the numbers. So most of them should know, should be able to determine way in advance how their performance is going to be, of course, based on these pools that they have internally, performed. Okay, so 2024 valid vote cast. So when we were discussing the assumptions, I told you that we're probably going to make an assumption of about 3% increment in the total valid vote cast, right? So um, you can see that when you look at the formula is building on the previous year's um, the previous year's total valid vote cast, right? By and so you can see that um, this is a half. For instance, the total valid vote cast was 83.44%. So just to determine the total valid, to increase the total valid vote cast in the current year by, okay, let me go by that again. So we have this. Okay, so if I should take you back here, you can see that it's computing the percentage, this, and then adding this, what is in cell O3 to it, and then multiplying it by what? The 2020, sorry, uh, sorry. Okay, so it's maintaining the total valid vote cast for 2020 and it's adding what is in cell O. Okay, let me bring it here. What is in cell O what? O3 and then multiplied by what? The total number of voters in the region for the current year. So basically, basically the assumption is that for 2024 total valid vote cast, we are maintaining what? The percentage that we recorded in the previous election, which is 2020. And of course, we know that based on our assumption, we expect that there should be a little increase. So, but because I've put zero here, it means that in the 2024, for this particular scenario, we expect the same percentage of the total valid vote cast, right? But I told you that we could play around it, right? So um, this is how the model works. If you put one here, then you can see that all the numbers have changed. So it means that we are increasing the total valid vote cast percentage, the percentage of the valid vote cast in 2020 election by 1%, right? But if you should do, we can do 2%. It changes the numbers. We can do 3%. It also changes the numbers. We can do up to 10%. But for now, let's just say that we are recording the same percentages as we did in the 2020 election. Yeah, so that's what basically we are using. So um, that's basically this particular assumption. Okay, so in the first scenario, if I should go back, what we are saying is that we are holding all variables constant, with the exception of what the 3% increase in voter turnout this year. So if we assume that for this particular year's election, based on the current voters register, nothing much happened, or nothing much will happen. The only thing that is increasing or changing is an increase in the voter turnout. So if um, if the turnout increases by 1%, right? Let's go down here and then see what percentage each of the political parties will get. So I've colored the NPP one in green, and I've colored the NDC one in yellow. So if the voter turnout percentage, or the percentage in the total valid vote cast, should just increase by 1%, then with all what the percentages that each party got in the region being the same as what they recorded last year, then in this election, NPP will get 51.17%, and NDC will get 47.48%, right? So if I should go up and also increase the total turnout by, say, 2%, assuming that NPP will win their 7 regions, and this will win their nine CM regions with the same percentages that they recorded last year, with the turnout increasing by 2%. You can see that the percentages of each party do not change much, right? And NDC still at 47%, NPP still at 51%. Let's say we have a whooping increase in turnout by, say, 6%. I don't expect it to be more than that though. So 6%. Um, we're still around the same figure, 51% for NPP, and then 47.49%. You can see that the number of votes that each party is getting increases a bit, but um, the percentage doesn't really change. Let's try this. So for NPP currently, you can see that they have 8,038,000. You can see that NDC also had 7.4 million, right? Let's increase this to 7%. Okay, right? So you can see that the total votes have increased a bit to 8.1 million, and this year have also shot up to, you know, 7.5 million, but the percentage still almost remains the same. So that should tell you that if, let me bring this back to zero, that should tell you that if the turnout, increases or decreases, and the percentages that each party is getting remains the same, I mean, there's not going to be much impact um, or any changes from what we recorded in the 2020 election, and then the APP in this scenario will win the election, and Dr. Baumia will be declared as the winner. I see the scenario very remote because, I mean, between 2020 and 2024, a lot of things have changed based on the current economic conditions. Some regions, which we normally see as swing regions, like, the central, the western, the greater Accra regions, there might be a lot of changes. And, Dr. Baumia, to the presence of Dr. Baumia in the 2016-2020 election, so some appreciation for the NPP in the northern regions, right? In the northern regions. Now that he is coming up for the election, I expect that his level of appreciation would also go up, right? So that is it. So that's just the first scenario. I'm planning to send this model to the first um the first 200 people that say I need the model, so that people can also help in this particular analysis. It's a very comprehensive model that can accommodate a whole lot of scenarios. So that is what we are going to do from now till the election on Saturday. So um, please comment, or I mean put in your views in the comments on whatever scenario that you want us to use in coming up with this model, so that we can feature that in our